Welcome to today's webinar on developing a note-taking system, brought to you by the Academic Resource Center at Georgetown University. Today's session will focus on how to take notes during class in a way that is useful and productive for you as a learner. One reason that students often struggle with note-taking is that they're trying to use the same system that another student is using, or they're trying to replicate a note-taking approach that works for a certain kind of class and use it for a class with a completely different approach to learning. The best note-taking systems are going to respond to your specific needs for notes within each class. A commonly asked question is, how should I be taking notes? Many students wonder about the advantage of taking digital notes with either a laptop or an iPad versus taking notes by hand with a traditional notebook. While both forms have their advantages and limitations, deciding how you take notes really depends on which medium you are most likely to engage with. Digital note-taking allows you more control over using your notes after class. You can easily copy and paste content, retype it into a more straightforward outline, or even change annotations and highlights. You can also take notes directly onto digital files, such as readings or slides from class. However, with more customization also comes slightly more work. You need to make sure you're setting up your note-taking system before class, or if you're just typing into a file without much prep work, then you need to make sure to organize your notes after class so that they don't get lost in the shuffle. Handwritten notes require significantly less setup. If you use a notebook, then your notes are automatically in chronological order. All you need to do is write. This is an especially easy way to annotate print readings or textbooks. However, any further customization is more difficult since you would need to copy your notes over in a different format. This approach makes more sense if you don't have any plans for your notes beyond reading them over in the future. Ultimately, there is no one answer to what is the best way to take notes. If you're in an information-dense class, and you would like to turn your notes into study guides or flashcards in the future, then taking notes in a digital format will work better for you. If you only need to refer back to your notes occasionally, then working with a paper notebook might be easier. If your class relies heavily on digital readings and materials, then taking notes digitally may help you stay more organized. If your class primarily uses print texts, then taking notes by hand may make more sense. Students often struggle to determine what exactly they should be writing down. This is particularly true in classes using several formats to present a lot of information. In order to answer this question, you need to first consider your reason for taking notes. We often take notes because we think we're supposed to. But before you start scribbling down every word that your professor says, ask yourself, why are you taking notes? Most people take notes to record information, but is there another reason? Perhaps note-taking helps you stay engaged in the class session, or perhaps it helps you process the information. Maybe it does none of these things, and you aren't sure why you're taking notes. You should also consider how you use your notes. That will help you better understand what kind of materials you are trying to produce when you're writing your notes. Do you study from your notes? Do you use them to look for paper ideas? Do you take notes and then never look at them again? Knowing how you want to use your notes can help you decide what to write down because you only need to record the information that meets that purpose. It's also important to ask yourself where else the information is available. If you spend time writing down content that is already written in a textbook, then it can be a waste of your energy to spend time frantically copying that same content down in a notebook. Instead, you can use that energy to engage in class more meaningfully. No matter how you answer these questions, your goal should be to take notes intentionally. Write down the information that you need to write down in order to produce notes that will be useful to you. If you're struggling to write down every word the professor says, but you don't use these notes as a study guide, then this is not an intentional way to take notes. But if writing down the information helps you stay focused, even though you know it's available elsewhere, then copying this content has a purpose. Sometimes we write down everything that happens during class because we don't know how to distinguish between what is important and what is unimportant during a course session. How do we filter out what should be written down when everything seems crucial? A smart approach is to focus on understanding the main ideas rather than the slight minutiae. This will lead to a better comprehension of the material as a whole. When first engaging with a new topic, you'll best learn it by focusing on the big picture first and then working to understand the smaller details second. Understanding the big picture will provide a framework to contextualize smaller details. So if you're learning a new subject for the first time during a class session, then approach your note-taking with the goal of understanding how the big pieces of this concept fit together. By big pieces, we mean themes, purpose, cause, and effect. If you already understand the overarching framework of a concept that you're going over in class, then you can use that class session to work on hammering out some of the details, such as terms, equations, plot and characters, dates, and so on. Even if you know your goal is to take notes that primarily help you capture the main idea of a class session, it can still be difficult to pick out the primary thread of a specific lecture. Try to hypothesize the big picture by understanding how this class session fits into the course as a whole. Some questions to ask yourself are, how does the subject matter of this class relate to your last class discussion? How does it relate to your homework? We often look at these disparate pieces of each class as if they are a temporary focus, when in actuality, each class session is building on the ideas of the class and homework that come before it. You can also get a sense of the big picture by looking over your syllabus or Canvas page for clear signals. Often professors will provide titles or learning goals for each class session here. These signifiers are there for a reason, so make use of them. With this in mind, your goal in note-taking should be to determine the main narrative of each class session. If you have a clear sense of what the overall concept of a session is, then you will have better retention and a better understanding of how to use this information. One way to identify this narrative is to look at titles and headings on slides to see what main idea your professor is covering. Just like papers have introductions and conclusions, sometimes presentations do as well. Pay attention to the beginning slides or ending slides to see if there is a summary. Of course, not every professor uses slides or presents their ideas in such an organized manner. If this is the case, consider reverse outlining. Create an outline of the major points as your professor goes through them. In doing this, you should try to distinguish between what is a heading or a main idea versus what falls under another heading. Looking at how the headings develop can give you a clue to the overall narrative. Of course, this approach doesn't mean that you can never record smaller details, only that you should aim to provide a structure for these details. Write down specific details if you are unsure if they exist elsewhere. But for details that you know are located elsewhere, such as a slide or a textbook, consider developing a symbol or abbreviation to communicate to yourself where you should reference. That will save you time and focus during class while still giving you the tools to locate that information in the future. Often, students are so focused on taking notes that they struggle to listen to what is actually happening in the class session. When considering how to take notes and listen at the same time, you want to once again think about your individual learning style and what's going to help you the most overall. Taking notes and paying attention at the same time. It can be done, but it is rather difficult. Decide which method best contributes to your learning and put your primary focus there. Once again, there's not a correct answer in terms of taking notes as superior, paying attention as superior. Instead, it's what works best for you. Instead of copying information verbatim, write down a combination of spoken and written ideas in your own words. This can be a good way to encapsulate everything that's happening in class. If you listen to the professor, read the slides, and instead of worrying about writing every detail, and instead you write your own summary, then you may get a sense of that overall narrative. Consider annotating slides in your own words in a way that you won't waste time writing information that's already there. What we mean by annotating slides or readings is that if you can come to class prepared with either your slides or your readings that you've digitally uploaded to a presentation, then that will make it easier to, in the future, just not waste time writing information. Instead, you can just add the new ideas in your own words. How should I approach note-taking if I zone out? That's a question we hear a lot because there's a lot going on in class, and sometimes we don't take notes because we can't pay attention in class. If that's the case, consider using note-taking not as something to record ideas for you to use later. Instead, use note-taking as a tool to stay focused and to anchor you to the class session. When you're using note-taking to help stay focused, you can give yourself a regular task that will help you stay engaged in class. There's no one way to do this, but a few examples of how to stay focused during class. One is to write down one main idea for each slide. So giving yourself the limit of, for every slide, make sure you're taking at least one note. That will help you at least tune back in whenever a new slide comes up. Write down 2 discussion questions throughout class. This can work as a class long agenda that isn't related necessarily to slides, but instead to a more general topic. Develop an outline of ideas as they're presented. Sometimes students zone out during class because they don't learn as well from reading slides or from listening. Instead, they learn best by being more active and by doing. So by presenting yourself with the task of creating an outline of ideas as they're being discussed, you're giving yourself a task that will both help you process the information better, but also keep you involved. You could also consider creating a map of how different concepts fit together. Notes don't always have to be taken in a traditional sentence writing format. You can interpret the ideas in your own way, creating a drawing, creating a mind map, a word cloud, something that still qualifies as note-taking, but again, is going to engage the more creative part of your mind. How should I prepare for note-taking before class? Sometimes the best way to make sure that your note-taking goes smoothly and is intentional is to set it up beforehand. Once you are in the habit of setting up your note-taking space before class, then it can become very easy and a very quick process. You just have to get over the stress of that first time of setting up notes in a preliminary way. How exactly should you set up your note-taking space? One of the most helpful ways is to prepare your note-taking space by downloading any slides that you may have from class or accessing any readings that you may want to add notes alongside. That way you can annotate those slides and those notes directly instead of later having to compile them all together. If you don't find it helpful to have the mess of slides with text in the margins, you could consider copying text from the slides into a new document, and then you can annotate that text throughout class as well. You can also just consider adding headings or titles to the note page, and at a minimum, just putting the date of the class session. Even that will help you stay organized and ready to start taking notes. You can also look at your syllabus for the lesson name or the learning objectives, and you can use these to create headings in your notes as well. That can help you also focus on the main ideas throughout the session so that you feel like you're capturing the information that your professor has basically clarified and forecasted that they view as important. Another question some students have is, should I review my notes after class? Reviewing your notes after class, not just when you're studying for an exam, but directly after a class session or sometime later that day, can assist you with retention. It's aspirational, but it can be super beneficial for a class with a lot of information or that you're having trouble comprehending. By reviewing your notes within a day or two after class, you're making use of the 24-hour rule. This means that if your brain sees information more than once in a 24-hour period, then it will process that information as being important and it will be more likely to remember it. So by looking at your notes again shortly after having learned it, that will help you retain that information. What you do in looking over these notes can be very quick or it can be very involved, but a few ways that you can look over them quickly. One is just to read over your notes briefly after class. You can even do this before you leave the classroom or leave the building where your class is taking place. Another thought is to underline the main ideas when reading over your notes, or to retroactively add headings to clarify the main ideas. That's something else that can be done very quickly right after class before you've lost either the motivation of having left the class session or before you've forgotten the content you just learned. Something else that can be helpful is to, after reading through your notes, write out just a quick summary of the class session, or even to voice record a summary of the class session. The process of summing everything up will help you make connections that maybe you didn't make when just listening to the information. When you have to restate it, that's when we really start to comprehend concepts, and then we really remember it better. I wanted to mention our next webinar, Creating a Plan for Midterms. This will be on Monday, October 2nd at 4 p.m. We'll be discussing how to take a look at all of your assignments, all of the deadlines that are coming up, and creating a balance between working on different assignments while also still working on homework. If there are any questions, please add them to the chat. Otherwise, thanks so much for coming and happy note taking.